or the Michelangelo, you know, come put a little salt here, the Dr. Dre of the kitchen, where you put your little sprinkle here, a little sprinkle there, you know what I mean, to make sure it's all right. Hey, how's it going there? My name is Joseph, AKA known as Champelli, San Francisco native. That's been passionate about cannabis since a very young age and been involved in the cannabis culture since basically, I mean, you know, late 80s is when I started cultivating, let's put it that way. Some of my earliest memories were in Amsterdam, actually. One of my brothers had basically a coffee shop in Amsterdam in the I guess it was like the late 70s, early 80s. So that was kind of like my earliest memories, was being in his apartment in Amsterdam. And it was like the smell of hash and the sound of Bob Marley in the early, you know, I'm trying to think how, I must have been like 8 years old or something like that, 7 years old when those were like my first kind of 6, 7 years old, or my kind of first memories of like seeing giant bales of black Lebanese hash, like opening a closet and just seeing like a closet stacked full of 10-kilo blocks of hash, like wrapped in like, so they used to wrap stuff in like cellophane back then. Some more of my memories was my brother growing in basically off of my mom's kitchen was a kitchen pantry that was all lit. It was like basically lit with skylights, and that's where like the dishes were, some plants, the cats, you know, the litter box and stuff. And I remember my brother basically cultivating and one of my brothers actually growing plants in that room there. And this is when I was in elementary school. And that's like the time I kind of first tried smoking. There was like basically leaves, you know, that I kind of scraped up and took these leaves and brought them to school and rolled them up with, you know, the homies that tried to roll them up and smoke them probably in some binder paper or something like that and figure it out. And this is like in, you know, 4th grade basically, you know, we were trying to smoke. So I don't know, I don't know. I'm, you know, 10, 11 years old essentially was like kind of the first attempt. Yeah, I mean, you know, kind of some of my first earliest cultivation was in that same pantry that I spoke about where my brother had cultivated. So in a way I kind of took a page from his book in a sense once he kind of moved out, and that space was there available to me. This is basically in, you know, middle school. I think 6th grade or something, 7th grade maybe, but essentially from there, I, you know, got some seeds. I was already buying weed, and I'd got some seeds out of the weed, and then from there, basically planted them in the pantry. And you know, my mom was totally opposed to it, and was like raising hell about me trying to grow and, you know, do any of that. So, but I ended up just still pursuing it and doing it. And I had some friends, a friend of my brother's there who was like old school smuggler type hippie from Humboldt. He basically told me about like, oh, if you kind of cut down the light on stuff, you can kind of like get stuff to flower earlier, you know? So I basically kind of, you know, in my own world, I started pioneering light deprivation in like 1988, you know, or something. It was, I guess 88, 87, 88. I started bringing the plants down from the kitchen pantry down into the basement and depriving them of light and then bringing them back up. So every day at 6 o'clock, I'd, you know, run home and like bring these plants down so they wouldn't get the light. And that's called light dep now, which is a very like super common practice. But back then, like nobody was really thinking about light dep at all, you know. But basically I started selling weed in order to just kind of keep my own, you know, my own little weed basically habit going in a way, you know. And then my mom was just like, we were like at odds about me just, you know, selling weed and stuff out of the house as like a super early young teenager. So I was kind of at war with her in a sense. Unfortunately, she wasn't having it because I was like, you know, already selling weed in middle school and smoking and growing. And then when high school hit, I basically ended up dropping out as a junior. I dropped out of high school and got my own apartment. This is like in 1991, and that's when I first did my first indoor grow. And that was like the only place that would rent to me. It was actually only a few blocks from here, pretty much. It was 14th and Woodward, and 14th and Woodward Street. It was like the only place. It was like super pretty, honestly, pretty ghetto and just messed up street. This is kind of the part of the time of like kind of the crack era was still going. So the street, there's like multiple different crack houses and heroin on the street and all this stuff. And then here's this, young white kid with a couple pit bulls who's like there, like, and I basically started growing with my best friend there, had set up a bunch of lights and started growing indoor for the first time, just kind of experimenting, on my own and figuring it all out as I went along, Yeah, I mean, at that time, actually, I already received traction. Even when I was at my mom's house growing, I had like a bunch of local kind of, local kind of big dope dealers, I would say, like my friends' uncles or my buddies' dads, who was like, they were like selling like tons of like basically brick weed or pretendo or Mexican weed at that time, like smuggling. Like I'd go over and it'd just be like roomfuls of just bales of different weed from different places, whether it was Mexico or other just southern hemisphere stuff, But those guys started buying weed off of me back then for like $400 an ounce, because I was growing like the super kill like back then in like '88, So yeah, so once I realized like, oh shit, that was like, I was like selling a bunch of weed for that expensive back then. It kind of started, it's like, damn, I could make money doing this, and kind of like I was just in love with the plant, and obviously the whole thing of it, was kind of like really excited about it all at that time as a teenager discovering it, It was called the ant juice, actually, and I named it the ant juice because it had like all these little ants were getting caught in the crystals of the weed, and like it was like, that was like, and the taste was super unique, nothing like today. Everything, a lot of strains were lost through the years back then, because people didn't have quite the amount of foresight to try to like keep genetics around and keep them going. So a lot of stuff was lost, but these particular genetics were just amazing. So it was like the ant juice, and like everybody, even the guys I was selling it to, loved the name, like, oh, the ant juice. So I was like already kind of branding and naming stuff back then. And I did that with a bunch of strains that I kind of named and branded as different kind of like different times I would grow, I'd put a new name on it, kind of dealing with the situation. Like these are like ants in the weed, like getting stuck in the crystals, and it kind of like, pop and fizzle, but it just tasted amazing, and everybody got super high, and I was able to sell it for, top dollar basically. Yeah, so I actually still have seeds of the original champagne, which the name kind of evolved and took a few different, went to Champelli and then short just Pelli. So it has a few different iterations basically of the name. But yeah, I still actually have seeds of it, and I've kind of just been holding out, waiting for the right situation, Yeah, at some point it's coming, it's coming, and then not all is lost, people think it's gone. But I mean, the last few years I've been really focused and working on new genetics, stuff that's current for the market. And, I've always been kind of just passionate about cultivating and breeding, and I mean, at this stage, I've kind of taken a little bit of a back seat with the cultivation side of it, is just because I'm so focused on the brand, I can't do everything. So, more delegating and working with partner cultivators who I can like breed some stuff and bring it to them and place it in their cultivation in their hands. So just part of the challenge now is just finding cultivators that I work well with that actually grow cannabis that's at the level and just the level that the expectations I have for the way weed needs to be grown, because I mean, people take it for granted, and especially now with all this commercial cultivation, like cultivation is such a key part of it and how you grow these plants, because one person can take the same strain to one cultivation and it comes out totally different, and one guy will do it and it'll be amazing, another guy it'll be shit, and it'll be the same strain and even practically maybe even the same conditions, So, a lot of that comes from having, strain knowledge and memory kind of embedded in my palate going back to the late 80s and seeing stuff that a lot of these people that are now in the game, just coming into the game 5-10 years, and I have like knowledge in my palate alone, going back for 35 years. With sound, I'm very like, sample based, or just unique sounds, finding stuff that's very like, I'm like hit orientated when it comes to producing music too. So I want stuff that like can be repetitive or have those qualities that like people would say could be a hit, you know what I mean? So like I treat cannabis the same way. I'm looking for stuff that could be repeated in a sense, people want to smoke it again and repeat the experience. So I'm looking for stuff that's, easy on the eyes with the art, or easy on the taste buds, and, creating stuff that's unique, If you're gonna cross something or make something, it's gotta be better than the original, you know what I mean? It's almost like remixing a song as well. Like you would want it to just be, even with the remix, you'd want to be as good or better than the original, So finding for like breeding, it's like finding that thing that sets, really sets it apart, honestly. Like right now in the strain game and with genetics is like you really want to find stuff that's gonna be, something that's going to be different or unique and is going to push the culture ahead as far as flavor wise goes, Yeah, so I ended up leaving the United States in 2001. I chose to leave. I kind of got a tip from a lawyer friend who basically recommended that I should leave the country due to I was adjacent to some other people's legal issues, and I kind of got caught up in basically somebody else's problems there. So there was a good chance if I would have stuck around, I probably would have done a significant amount of time at the time, So yeah, so I ended up coming back in, like 8 years after I left. I left in 2001 and came back like a couple years too early. With the federal statute of limitations is like 10 years for certain stuff. And I came back like a year, almost 2 years early, back in the United States, and had to, basically there was still a warrant for my arrest that I hadn't realized even existed. I didn't know what I really was wanted for exactly. So when I came back, I had to go through basically the justice system. In the end of the day, I was charged with conspiracy to distribute cannabis. And did 6 months, which isn't a ton of time considering people are doing time in years for cannabis still. So it is an issue that's close to my heart, and I try to be, active where I'm able to, as far as like bringing light to the injustices in the cannabis reform department and, just legalization in general. The name of the brand was synonymous with, this particular strain, Champelli, that went nationwide to a certain degree amongst like the kind of high circles of, say, hip hop and, even extreme sports and stuff like that. Had a lot of skaters and motocross guys and a lot of artists, from the West Coast, from LA all the way to New York, basically were mentioning my strain in their music just organically, Yeah, there's a lot of holy shit moments for sure. Like one time, I actually flew. I became friends with Juvenile. I came out here during the Hot Boys, like 1999, when he had his major hits. Shout out to Juvie. And basically, he was out here in the Bay Area promoting at the radio station, and I had a really good friend at the radio station, DJ Franzen, and he basically connected me with Juvenile. And then from there, me and Juvie became homies, and he invited me out to his birthday party in New Orleans. So we went out to the House of Blues, and at that time, I decided to bring like a pound of Champelli with me. I actually didn't. I actually feel bad. I didn't actually fly with it. My friend chose to fly with it, and at that time in New Orleans, and I think even now it's like, a death sentence basically, virtually, This is in 1999. But so a pound of Champelli in New Orleans, and I showed up for Jewy's birthday. We went to his birthday at the House of Blues, and basically hung out with him for the night. And then the next day we went to the Magnolia Projects and we're hanging out with them there and got that whole experience, which was really dope. Cannabis has always kind of been like a magical plant for me, as far as just like manifesting and bringing things to life and being a conduit for connectivity. And it is like one of those, if you look at it, it's a glue in so many different people's lives, and it connects such cross sections of cultures and different people for so many different reasons. Everybody from different walks of life can be connected through cannabis. One of the key messages of the plant is like, the plant, I feel like in cannabis, is like, used correctly, is a way to awaken your sensitivities and to make you aware of, things that are off maybe within your own life, and recognize inconsistencies or imbalances and stuff like that, and then to give you the reflection enough to be able to correct those imbalances and stuff. And we should be using it to be able to balance our lives and respect the earth and and Mother Nature and so forth. That's what I believe it's really sent here to do. And I mean, the plant would be like, it's probably screaming out and turning over in its grave, so to speak, as far as like how much waste is happening. Like, we make these single-use packages, so it's like a cannabis industry, although we try to discount it as not having a huge footprint, I believe it does have like a pretty large footprint, and it's starting to have even a larger one, whether it's resources, whether it's water, power, even petroleum-based nutrients, and then petroleum-based packaging. And it's all stuff I'm aware of and I'm conscious of, and it's stuff that, as the brand grows, I'd like to try to find ways to reduce that packaging. And I remember when I was there when Berner was printing his first sweatshirts out of the garage, watching him do this stuff, and then boom, now it's the, and I've watched that happen with a few friends. I was around early on when Nicky Diamonds first started Diamond Supply Co., and then watching Berner do his thing and stuff. So, I've been around a lot of, Bay Area is very entrepreneurial and independent in that sense. So you get a lot of that sort of energy out of the Bay. It's not easy to cook at scale for people and have food taste the same, just the same as it's like creating cannabis at scale is it's not always that easy to create weed that's gonna taste the same as on a more boutique level,